lasciatemi presentare un uomo che in qualche modo nella sua vita ha sempre cercato di individuare quale potesse essere il futuro, soprattutto il futuro delle nostre economie, e molto spesso ha individuato quali potevano essere i giri di volta. Un uomo che vi voglio leggere un po' di etichette che gli hanno appiccicato. Allora, politologo, conferenziere, globetrotter, messaggero dell'ambientalismo produttivo. A me è sembrata tutta fatica sprecata. Fondamentalmente lui è un navigatore del pensiero, un uomo sicuramente curioso. La curiosità è importante nel mio lavoro di giornalista, ma è importante forse ancora di più nel vostro lavoro e nel lavoro di chi come lui da economista cerca di dire a noi che cosa potrebbe succedere. Ma è un uomo che ha anche saputo cambiare idee, nel senso è un uomo che si è mosso in quelle parti delle cartine che sono ai limiti, ma ha anche saputo vedere da che parte girava il vento e cambiare in parte le proprie posizioni. Vi leggo, sempre per farvi capire tutta la sua carriera, un po' di titoli dei suoi libri, buona parte. La fine del lavoro, il secolo biotech, anzi biotech perché biotech sarebbe in inglese, ecocidio, economia all'idrogeno, l'era dell'accesso, la civiltà dell'empatia, la terza rivoluzione industriale e adesso c'è la società a costo marginale zero. Il sottotitolo è l'Internet delle cose, l'ascesa del commons collaborativo e l'eclisse del capitalismo. Ci presenta una tesi semplice, potente e anche veramente molto interessante. Dice che la diffusione del modello open source, della sharing economy, dell'internet delle cose, starebbe sgretolando il dominio del capitalismo così come lo conosciamo. Non sappiamo se ha ragione, non possiamo saperlo, però sappiamo di sicuro che è uno che dobbiamo tenere presente e che dobbiamo ascoltare. Signore e signori, Jeremy Rifkin.
Buongiorno. Always nice to be here in Milan. I'm going to invite everyone to take their jackets off, because I'm going to take mine off. It's hot in here. All the folks with cameras to go to the back of the room. I'm used to a classroom. You have to go all the way to the back. Turn the cell phones off. iPads off, nice and quiet. Okay. Here's the situation. GDP is slowing all over the world, and in the United States and China. Productivity is slowing all over the world. Unemployment stubbornly high all over the world, everywhere. We are at the beginning of the sunset for a great economic era in history on our watch. But we're also seeing the emergence of a completely new economic paradigm in the wings. In order to understand both the crisis and the opportunity facing the business community, government, and civil society, we need to grasp what makes up a great economic paradigm shift. What's it made out of? Then we will understand the roadmap for the business community in this room. When we look at all the great economic paradigm shifts all through history, they share a common denominator. At a certain moment of time, three defining technologies that are essential for economic life emerge and converge to create what we call in engineering a general purpose technology platform, a new infrastructure for completely reorganizing economic life. What are those three defining technologies? New forms of communication to more efficiently manage the economic activity. new sources of energy to more efficiently power the economic activity, new modes of transportation to more efficiently move the economic activity. When new communication technologies emerge with new energies and new modes of transportation to manage, power, and move economic life across the value chain, it changes the economic equation fundamentally. I'll give you two examples. First Industrial Revolution, 19th century. Second Industrial Revolution, 20th century. First Industrial Revolution, Britain. The Brits move us from manual print presses to steam power printing. Big leap in communication technology. Then we built out the telegraph. The Brits then went to cheap coal in the hinterland, and they created an invention, the steam engine, to move that energy. Then the Brits put the steam engine and coal on rails and locomotives on national rail systems. Communication, energy, transport. 20th century, Second Industrial Revolution, another convergence of communication, energy, transport, and logistics, the United States. Centralized electricity allowed Alexander Graham Bell to invent the telephone, a big leap forward in communication to manage economic life. Then we found cheap oil in Texas, and we created a new technology, the internal combustion engine, to move it. And then Henry Ford put us all on the road, cars, buses, and trucks. That Second Industrial Revolution platform, communication, energy, and transport and logistics, took us through the 20th century. It peaked in July of 2008. Remember that month? That's when Brent crude oil hit a peak of $147 a barrel on world markets. And when that happened, the prices for everything we pay for across the value chain went through the roof. And the entire global economy shut down that month. That was the economic earthquake. The collapse of the financial market 60 days later, that was an aftershock. Everything depends on fossil fuels in the Second Industrial Revolution. Fertilizers, pesticides, construction materials, pharmaceutical products, synthetic fiber, power, transport, heat, and lights, all made out of carbon or moved by it. So when oil started to go over 90 a barrel, all the other prices started to edge up at 147 a barrel. Purchasing power shut down. When that happened, the price of oil in 2009 and 10 went way down to $55 a barrel because there was no economic activity. As soon as we tried to reinvest the inventories and build again, we started to grow, GDP started to go up, and at about $100 a barrel, purchasing power started to slow again, and at 117 a barrel, it just slowed back down again. These are cycles now for a sunset for a great industrial revolution. A little bit of GDP growth, then slow down. We're not going to get through this window. There's no magic bullet. Because we have optimized, and I'll get back to this later, the aggregate energy efficiency for productivity of this Second Industrial Revolution platform, and we haven't moved in 20 years. So it doesn't make any difference if you're China, the United States, Italy, or any country in the world. If you're living on this old platform of communication, energy, and transport, which has now optimized its aggregate efficiency and productivity, there is not much more we can get out of it. There's no new business opportunity here. There's no prospects for employment for our young people. No country can escape if they're in this platform. We are, however, on the cusp of a third industrial revolution. A new configuration of communication technologies, energy, and transport and logistics. The internet, which is a digital communication technology, is morphing, and it's beginning to converge with a digital renewable energy internet and a digital automated GPS-guided and soon driverless transport and logistics internet to create three digital technologies to manage, power, and move economic life. I'll share an anecdote. Your Prime Minister took over the European Council last year for 6 months. He asked me to come to Venice, Mr. Renzi, and join him. He issued a declaration called the Digital Venice Declaration for a Digital Europe. And what I said to your young Prime Minister, he's almost in the digital generation, I said, look, when I came there, I said, this is not just about broadband, free Wi-Fi, and big data. If that's what you think the digital revolution is, you don't have a clue. This is about digitalizing communication, energy, transport, and logistics, and those three internets, when they come together, they form a kernel. And that kernel is essential because we then build out what's called an Internet of Things platform for the kernel. We are going to put sensors in every device, every machine, every appliance across the value chain, so they can send data back to the kernel: communication, energy, transport, internet. We've got about 14 billion sensors out there now in the agricultural fields, factories, retail stores, smart homes, smart vehicles, warehouses, and they're beginning to send data in real time back to the three components of every economic system: communication, energy, transport, and logistic, internet. By 2030, one research study, Fairchild says, maybe 100 trillion sensors connecting every machine so they can talk with each other, talk with us. And what we're actually creating here, we're creating an external global brain. This is a huge leap forward for the human race, potentially, if we can get there. By digitalizing every aspect of the economic value chain, we can bring the human race together so that we can eliminate all the inefficiencies of vertical integration of the centralized first and second industrial revolution, eliminate the efficiencies so we can directly engage with each other, democratize economic life, and create a more ecological-based civilization. But the moment we introduce this great leap forward, fear. 100 trillion sensors connecting everything with everyone. And so we're hearing, what about network neutrality? How do we ensure that governments or certain companies or industries don't try to enclose this domain? What do we do about guaranteeing data security? How do we assure privacy in this digital age? How do we thwart cybercrime and cyber terrorism and disruptions to the interconnectivity of the planet? These are huge challenges. They're going to keep us engaged in social and political struggle for several generations. But let's assume for this afternoon that we can address these very, very difficult challenges that come along with this new economic era, just for a few moments. Here's what this Internet of Things platform for a digital Italy and digital Europe will give us. Here's what this third industrial revolution brings us. Every one of us that's connected to the internet, we have 3 billion people connected. I just got back from China, where I'm working with the Chinese leadership, and some of you know the Vice Premier, Wang Yang. He said, Jeremy, we now have a $25 smartphone. Everyone's going to be connected in the next 20 years, everyone. So that means any of us connected to the incipient Internet of Things platform can go up there and have a transparent picture of everything going on in the economy of the planet if it stays open. Even big companies in this room didn't have that kind of information up to now. This transparency allows for a great democratization of economic life and an expansion of the entrepreneurial spirit in vast social networks. Everyone becomes entrepreneurial in vast social networks. So here's what this allows us to do. Everyone in this room has a value chain. If you're an individual or you're part of a family, you're an owner, you're a worker, you're a small and medium-sized enterprise, a big company, a nonprofit, we all have value chains. And each day, we're marshaling economic activity, we're routing it, we're shipping it. If we're owners and workers, we're reconfiguring goods and services at every step. We're storing them, we're consuming them, and we're recycling them. We all have a value chain, every one of us. It means that any one of us in this room, as an individual, a family, or a business, or a nonprofit organization, can go up on this Internet of Things platform that's emerging, and we can cut our swath of the value chain out. Just cut it out. And watch our data come through that value chain. This will allow us in real time to watch our data in our value chain and use analytics to create our own algorithms and our own apps so that every one of us can dramatically increase our aggregate energy efficiency at every step of conversion of all of our value chains, so we can dramatically increase our productivity and dramatically reduce our marginal cost, the cost of producing an additional unit of a good or service. So if we're a capitalist enterprise, we're going to be able, at low marginal cost, to be competitive in a completely digitalized, streamlined, very low marginal cost capitalist global society. And some of our marginal costs are going to head toward near zero, meaning that goods and services will no longer be subject to the market. They'll be free, they'll be abundant, they'll be shareable on the emerging sharing economy on the collaborative commons. It is the digitalization of communication, energy, transport, logistics, and the rest of the system that allows us to actually fulfill the capitalist dream. We've always said in classical economic theory that we are encouraged to create new technologies that increase our aggregate efficiencies and productivity so we can reduce our marginal cost, so we can put out cheaper goods, win over consumers, bring some profits back to the investors. And we've always said in every business school, the optimum market is where you sell at marginal cost. We simply never anticipated the final triumph of the invisible hand. A technology revolution so extreme that it could reduce marginal cost to a very low ebb. It means capitalism stays, flourishes, if it can maintain itself with high volume, low marginal cost. And then we have the sharing economy. What is this sharing economy? Capitalism is giving birth to a progeny. That progeny is the sharing economy and the collaborative commons, and it's flourishing alongside the exchange economy in the capitalist market. Like any parent-child relationship, capitalism, the parent's going to have to nurture this child, the sharing economy, let it grow, let it mature, let it create its own identity on the world stage. But in doing so, the parent's going to be transformed by the child, meaning that capitalism is going to be utterly, completely reconfigured because it's going to have to find ways to adjust to this new child that's growing up and is soon going to be an equal partner with the parent. To the extent that capitalism can find new business models to help nurture and aggregate these commons, it will flourish into the next era in history. We are already on the cusp of a hybrid economy, part exchange economy, capitalist market, part sharing economy, collaborative commons. And by mid-century, capitalism will be here, but it won't be the exclusive arbiter of economic life. It's going to share the stage with its child grown up. This is good for the society. The partnership between these two economic systems is going to take us forward to democratize economic life and create a more sustainable society, if we can get there. If we can get there. We have already seen the impact of digitalization on reducing marginal cost. In the last 15 years, it started with Napster, file sharing and music. The communication internet has shown us the future because in the last 15 years, 3 billion people on the communication internet have become prosumers. There's still sellers and buyers in the world, and there's still owners and workers, and they probably always will be. But now we've got a new category, prosumers. They produce at low to zero marginal cost and consume and share what they produce with each other on the sharing economy. So we now have 3 billion people who have been prosumers at one time or another, everyone in this room. Millions of young people every day are producing and sharing their own music, bypassing the music industry. If you share your music with one person or a billion people, it's the same cost, near zero marginal cost. They're producing and sharing YouTube videos, open source, no intellectual property, near zero marginal cost. Producing and sharing news blogs, social media. They're contributing to Wikipedia and knowledge and education. And now millions of kids are taking open online college courses and getting college credits. It's all at near zero marginal cost. Whole industries have been disrupted. The music industry is a shadow of itself. Television has shrunk. Newspapers and magazines have gone out of business, and I'm in book publishing. Wow, how do we compete with free ebooks? Pirate Bay had my book out before my publishers, and they even ranked it before Amazon. I love it. These kids are great. So what I'm saying here is, while it disrupted traditional industries, thousands and thousands of new capitalist enterprises and nonprofits emerged, because they are the ones, whether it's Wikipedia, nonprofit, or Google profit, they're aggregating the networks. And it's digitalization that allows them to aggregate the network so the rest of us can produce and share for each other. So old industries disrupted, new industries emerged. But we thought there'd be a firewall here. And while the zero marginal cost phenomena might impact the virtual world of bits, it wouldn't go over the firewall to the physical world, the brick and mortar world. What I'm saying in the new book, Zero Marginal Cost Society, we've breached the firewall now. It's called the Internet of Things. When the communication internet, digital, converges with the digital renewable energy internet and the digital automated and transport internet, we move over the firewall, and now we can entertain the idea of the human race writ large as prosumers producing and sharing their own green electricity all over the world, billions of people. And with car sharing services on automated transport and logistics internets, moving to democratize mobility and logistics, and with 3D printing, a whole generation becoming good at additive manufacturing and producing at low marginal cost in the capitalist market, or at zero marginal cost for their friends in the sharing economy. Let's look at energy. I've advised the chancellor since she came into office. She had me actually come there the first month, and when she came into office, and the first question I asked the chancellor is, Madam Chancellor, how do you grow the German economy, the EU, or the global economy in the last stages of a great industrial era? That was 7 years ago. They got ahead of the game. That first night she said, I want this third industrial revolution for Germany. 7 years later, I was with the chancellor last Monday. The chancellor and Jean-Claude Juncker, the president of the European Commission, and President Hoyer, the president of the European Investment Bank, opened up a conference in Berlin. They asked me to do the opening address. I laid out what I'm laying out for you. We're heading to digital Europe. You're going to hear a lot about it in these industries. This is the next stage of the European journey. It's going to launch this year. We have provided for you, by the way, on the website this afternoon, the memorandum that I prepared for the European Commission, the European Union. It's 7,000 words, and you can see the whole layout and how your industry is going to be impacted and how you can find value. So energy. Germany's 27% green electricity this afternoon, solar and wind. They're heading to 35% solar and wind by 2020. They're heading to 100% solar, wind, geothermal, and other energies by 2040. They're on the move. The fixed cost of a solar panel and wind turbine are now on an exponential curve for 20 years, just like computing. I'm the oldest person in this room, I'm sure. And when I was a little boy in the 50s, we had computers that cost millions of dollars, only a few. We didn't anticipate the Intel chip and Moore's Law, double the capacity, half the cost, every 2 years, $25 smartphones. Do you know that the same curve is happening in solar and wind? The old energy industries are either they don't know or they just don't want to deal with it. A solar watt cost $78, $76 to $78 to produce one solar watt in 1978. It's 36 cents today, and it's heading towards zero. And we now have regions in Europe and America where the power companies aren't buying coal and nuclear and gas. They're buying solar and wind at 4 cents a kilowatt hour in long-term contracts, and we've just begun this revolution. But once you pay for that solar panel or wind turbine or geothermal heat pump in Germany, the fixed cost, the marginal cost of that energy, near zero. The sun doesn't send a bill over Germany. The wind is not sending us a bill over Germany, and the geothermal heat is not sending us a bill over Germany. Yes, we have a hump to get over. We have to put in storage. These are intermittent energies. That's going to infrastructure cost. We have to put in advanced meters and digitalization, a lot of work for your industries. But as we move across this hump, that energy internet is going to allow businesses in Germany to plug and play on their value chain with near zero marginal cost energy. The German government and this business community are pretty smart. Who's producing all of this electricity? There are 4 major power companies in Germany. We thought they were invincible, vertically integrated giants 7 years ago, EMBW, RWE, E.ON, Vattenfall. What happened to them in 7 years is what happened to the music industry, television, newspapers, magazines, and book publishing, even quicker. Millions of people in Germany producing their own energy. They create electricity co-ops, shared commons, consumers, farmers, SMEs. Every one of them got low-interest loans from the banks. No one turned down because you pay with the energy savings and the feed-in tariff. And they're producing the vast majority of the electricity. The big four power companies are only producing 7% of the new electricity, and they're getting out of the game. They're vertically integrated and centralized. They can't scale millions of small players. Cooperatives do that. This is power to the people. We are democratizing energy as we've democratized culture, entertainment, news, and knowledge. Everyone now is a prosumer, an entrepreneur, but in deep social networks. Does this mean the end of the power and transmission companies? No, but they have to do a new model. They're not going to leave the second industrial revolution tomorrow morning, but they better be in a portfolio for a third industrial revolution as well to make this 40-year transition. And we said to them, look, we have millions of small players producing electricity. In 10 years from now, on these exponential curves, hundreds of millions of people are going to produce electricity right there in their homes, offices, and neighborhoods. In 25 years from now, you'll be alive to see this, most of you. We're going to have 1 billion people more. They're all going to be producing their electricity. Cheap as using their smartphones, with digital technology. So the mission of the power company is you aggregate and set up the energy internet the way Google, Facebook, Twitter, and others set up the virtual web internet commons. We'll send our electricity to you, the cooperatives. You manage the internet, energy internet, and the way you'll make money is by selling as little electricity as you can sell. You will set up partnerships with thousands of enterprises, profit, nonprofit, government, and you will manage their value chains. You will actually look at their data and manage their analytics and create algorithms for them so they can dramatically increase their aggregate efficiencies across their value chains, increase their productivity, reduce their marginal cost, and all those thousands of institutions will share their productivity gains back with the electricity transmission company. More money, less electricity. 5 years ago, I debated Mr. Tyson, the head of E.ON, at his request in Amsterdam, not in Germany. He said, we're not doing this. 2 months ago, they took the model. They're selling off their fossil fuel and nuclear. They're moving into managing the services. ERDF, Mr. Poglio, EDF, joined us. We're doing a build-out. My global consulting group is building out in regions around the world. We're building out northern industrial France. EDF and ERDF are with us to build this platform out in greater Lille metropolitan area. They're not leaving the second industrial revolution, but they want to be also in the third. It's good business. Power to the people. The digitalization of communication and energy allows us to digitalize an automated GPS-guided driverless transport and logistics system to move economic activity. The young kids today, they're all sharing vehicles. And why? Digitalization. The internet allows them to just go up there on their smartphone, connect to a car sharing service, and then immediately to the logistics internet, GPS guidance. Within 3 minutes, a driver connects with you and you're on your way. These kids are never going to own cars again, nor their children, nor their grandchildren. That's grandma and grandpa. They want access to mobility, not ownership. You remember my book, The Age of Access? I said this was going to happen 14 years ago. My colleagues said this isn't going to happen. It's happening. So each successive generation, try to imagine 3 generations from now, nobody's going to own vehicles. For every car shared, 15 cars are eliminated from production. Now, Larry Burns was the executive vice president of General Motors till 5 years ago. He just did a study. It's in the book. He said we can eliminate 80% of the vehicles in the middle-sized city in America like Ann Arbor, Michigan. He did the study. This is the former executive VP of General Motors 5 years ago. Extrapolate his study. We have 1 billion cars, buses, and trucks in dense urban areas. We're going to eliminate 80% of them with vehicle sharing in the next generation. Think about the impact of this on climate change, eliminating these vehicles and the materials we use. The other 200 million vehicles on a digitalized automated transport logistics internet, they're going to be electric and fuel cell vehicles. They're going to be operating at near zero marginal cost electricity from an energy internet across the continents. And they're going to be driverless in 10 years with very low marginal labor cost. And they're going to be accompanied by drones at very low marginal cost to move the logistics chain. This is all, everything I'm mentioning so far is already happening. and it just needs scale up. So does this mean the end of the big automobile companies? No, but they have to change their model. Not tomorrow, but in the next 30 years. They're still going to sell a lot of cars tomorrow morning. But then the question is, who is going to aggregate the automated transport and logistics internet? Transport industry? So eventually they'll have the cars, much fewer cars, but they will manage that internet for the rest of us for the services. If they don't, maybe Amazon and Google would like to do it. The fact is, even with the electricity grid, if the utility companies don't do it, the telecom companies would like to do it, the cable companies would like to do the electricity, ICT would like to do it, Schneider and I Group and others would like to do it. So there's going to be a pretty big hustle here on who's going to aggregate and collaborate with each other across industries, communication, energy, transport, internet. Does this make sense? You got to be pretty young to move on this revolution. It's going to come fast. So, where does this leave us? Our young people are sharing their virtual goods, their information, their knowledge, their entertainment. They're sharing renewable energy now. How about 3D printed products? We've got a whole generation of young people now who are beginning to create their own products in 3D printers. All of it's open source, no software, zero marginal cost, no property rights. They're using garbage for their filament, the kids. They're using recycled plastic, paper, and metal. They just have to collect it. Very low marginal cost. It's additive manufacturing. It uses 1/10 of the materials of centralized factories. Some of the fabrication labs here in Italy and elsewhere are using their own renewable energy off-grid to power the 3D printer. And some of the labs are using their own electric vehicles powered by their energy to take it to market. And in 10 years from now, those vehicles are going to be printed with redistributed materials. The first car out is an Italian car, the Strati, put out by Local Motors. You always are first in the game. The question is whether you can scale up and still lead, but you're always first in the game. You cannot beat the creativity in this country. High-end electronics, fashion, food, architecture. But it's not just being first in the game, you got to scale it. You all know what I'm talking about here. So, here's where we stand right now. You remember I mentioned the term aggregate energy efficiency. That is the ratio of potentially useful work. What does this mean? When we used to think there were two factors that went into productivity, better machines and better workers. But when Robert Solow won the Nobel Prize for Economic Growth Theory, he let a little secret out. He said, you know, when we track every year of the Industrial Revolution, better machines and workers count for only 14% of the productivity. Where's the other 86% come from? Don't know. Abraham Abramowitz, the former head of the American Economic Association, said, this is a measure of our ignorance. Are you surprised that economists did not know 20 years ago where 86% of productivity comes from? It's a long story. I won't go into it now, but they never studied the basic laws of economics, which are the laws of thermodynamics. Economic theory is wedded to classic Newtonian physics. A body in motion stays in motion. That's Baptist Say's law that supply generates demand, which stimulates supply, which generates demand. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Adam Smith borrowed that for the invisible hand, supply and demand. The problem is Newton's physics doesn't have anything to do with economics. If you're an engineer here, you know you study thermodynamics. Economics is about thermodynamic activity. First law, all energy is constant. We don't create or destroy energy. Second law, we do change it. From order to disorder, concentrated to dispersed, hot to cold. So we are a closed system. We exchange energy, but we don't exchange matter with the universe. We got a lot of energy from the sun, but we don't get much meteorites or cosmic dust down here. So we take low entropy available material energy from this planet, the remnant of the suns, and all of us are converting those materials, rare earths, metals, fossil fuels, every day. We take them from the earth, they're available, and every step of conversion and every value chain, we're embedding energy into the product or service, but then we lose energy in the process of the conversion. It's called entropy. This is aggregate energy efficiency, and we now know, a new generation of economists, that this is about 85% of productivity. We started off the second industrial revolution in 1905 with 3% aggregate energy efficiency on that platform of communication, energy, and transport. The US got up to 13% aggregate energy efficiency in the 1990s, and we've never moved since. Japan led the world at 22% and hasn't moved since the 1990s. No one's moving. When you hear all this debate on TV, why is productivity lagging? And the economists don't know because they don't study thermodynamics. If you look at the year-to-year totals, aggregate efficiency has stopped everywhere. And if you're on that old platform, it doesn't make any difference if you're China or the United States, you can't get any more out of that platform. If we digitalize communication, energy, and transport and create an Internet of Things platform over the next 25 years with the help of every industry in this room, we can move from 13% aggregate energy efficiency, our global economists and my team have run the numbers, we can go to 40%. Then thermodynamics slows us down with the technologies we now know. That's huge. That's why you see the reports from Cisco and GE saying we're going to have 14 trillion, 20 trillion in new savings and productivity. They're not quite sure why, but they know that digitalization does this. I've just outlined why from an engineering point of view. We're going to have to build out this infrastructure. It's going to cost money. How do we come up with the money? I've been back and forth to Brussels, meeting with the new leadership, Mr. Juncker and his team in the parliament and in Germany. And I said, you know, we already have the money. This is just, this idea we don't have the money is almost amusing. In 2012, in the EU, we spent $741 billion on infrastructure in a bad year. That's public and private investment. $741 billion in a bad year. The problem's not the money, it's where it's going. We're taking all of this investment and we're taking the money and pouring it into a second industrial revolution platform of centralized telecommunication, fossil fuel and nuclear energy, and a moribund internal combustion engine system on dumb roads and rail. We can't get any more aggregate energy efficiency out of this system. If we simply reprioritize and took only 25%, let the 75% stay there, so if some guy in Italy has a cement factory, he can build a road to nowhere. Let him do it. But take 25% and reprioritize it to lay out this new infrastructure in every region of Europe. We have digital Europe in 25 years. Every industry is involved in this. The only one I don't have a job for here is the energy industry. Oil, but I guess GDF Suez and a few others are moving on the new model, which is interesting. Some of the energy companies, which we will not name in the room, are not. However, if you are a telecom company, a cable company, if you're in electricity, power, and transmission, if you're ICT, if you're consumer electronics, if you are transport and logistics, if you are manufacturing or life sciences, you're going to be engaged in the build-out. We have to take the entire energy configuration of Italy in 25 years and turn it from fossil fuel and nuclear to distributed renewable energies in every neighborhood of Italy. That means we have to retrofit every office, factory, and building in all of Italy because they're inefficient. And so you can't put micro power on a building that's leaking. So this is going to keep the construction industry going for 40 years with energy savings companies because we're going to have to retrofit all the buildings, and that's going to mean millions of unskilled, semi-skilled, and professional labor. In Nord-Pas-de-Calais, where we're working now, we have 1 million buildings we're going to convert. We're going to spend billions just on the retrofits. Then we have to install the renewable technologies on them to turn them into micro power plants. Germany has already transformed 1 million buildings into micro power plants. Lots of jobs. Then we have to convert the entire electricity grid of Italy from servomechanical and dumb to digitalized and smart. Who's going to lay down the underground cable? Going to need a lot of unskilled and semi-skilled work. Then we're going to need the transmission companies and ICT, maybe cable and telecom. Who's going to aggregate this new system and put it online? That's a lot of economic opportunity and a lot of employment. We have to take the transport grid of Italy and convert it from dumb to smart roads and from internal combustion to electric and fuel cell transport. Who's going to put in the millions of power, the charging stations, digitalize up to the transport internet? Robots aren't going to do this. Every parking space has to have a charging station so you can charge your cars, buses, and trucks and light rail even, get power from the grid, the energy internet, or send it back. We have to put sensors across the entire logistics chain, the warehouses and the roads. That's going to require real human beings doing that. What I'm suggesting is this. We have two last generations of massive labor and a lot of economic opportunities. Some of you remember a book I wrote called The End of Work in 1995. And I said at that time that over the next 40 years, we would automate industry after industry, manufacturing, white collar, and then I said with analytics and software, I said back then, we would do it with AI, we would automate conceptual work, knowledge work, remember? What I didn't anticipate is that we have one last surge of employment because none of us saw the third industrial revolution in 1995. This is only a short reprieve because we are automating every aspect of capitalism with digitalization. But laying out this infrastructure will require every industry in this room and lots of workers to put it in. That gives us 40 years, one last surge of mass employment. But once the system's in, it's called smart world. It runs on analytics and AI and algorithms and very small workforces. Does anyone here in your businesses think with the digital revolution that you're going to have mass labor in 2050 in a capitalist market? So we have a reprieve period which gives us some breathing room. We can bring 2 generations of Italians back to work tomorrow morning if the business community and government would come together with civil society and open the damn door. Germany's done it. Little Denmark's done it. China, I must say, has just done it. Premier Lee had read my last book. He said, we're going to have the third industrial revolution there. I visited there with their leadership. After my first visit, to show you how fast China moves, after my first visit, China announced 11 weeks later $82 billion investment on the national grid to lay out an energy internet across China starting this year so millions of Chinese people can produce their own solar and wind electricity and send it back to the grid. That's why you saw this week they're starting off on this new pollution drive. It's the outline that I'm talking about right now. Where will Italy be? If little Denmark can do it, if Germany can do it. Italy is only second to Germany in manufacturing steel, correct, in Europe, in the EU? You got all the expertise that you need. So, where do we head from here? Once we put in this smart system, how do people make a living? Do we just give people an income and they just sit around their whole life? Of course not. There's always something to do. We're going to see a migration of employment from the more and more automated capitalist market to the civil society, the not-for-profit sector, the social economy. In 1995, in that book, End of Work, I said that would happen eventually. Because this sector requires humans, not machines. It's social capital, not market capital. Health, education, taking care of our little children in child care centers, assisted living for the elderly, culture, arts. There's all sorts of activity requiring humans with humans that's absolutely essential to our survival. We're already seeing a migration to this system. The nonprofit sector is growing by 42% in revenue in the 40 countries surveyed, and GDP is growing at 16%. And the employment's growing faster in this sector than in the capitalist market. 10% of the employment in my country is now in this sector. In parts of Europe, it's 15%. So the real question economists ask is, well, then how do they get paid? Don't they have to rely on government grants and philanthropy? No. What we found is with deregulation, when Maggie Thatcher and Ronald Reagan introduced deregulation, government got out of the business of providing grants, and philanthropy couldn't do it. So nonprofits, I was there, we used to hire people to come up with proposals for government grants. Well, they were not coming anymore, so we had to hire kids out of the business schools to create new businesses for us so we could have fees for services. The best thing Maggie Thatcher and Ronald Reagan ever did with us is they made us become self-sustaining. So now in 40 countries surveyed, a majority of the income in this social sector, which is massive, is fees for services. You pay for health care or education or a good environment in your neighborhood, et cetera. We're moving from deep work to deep play. Deep play is more impressive. It engages the human mind. It's finding a way as a human race to explore our sociability and our place on this planet and our journey in the universe. There's no reason for human beings to have to slave beside machines or drive trucks up and down the highway every day. To believe we're going to be stuck in this old paradigm for all of eternity is short-sighted. In this room, you're here today to talk about the digital revolution, and all the industries in this room can flagship Italy as a leader in this next industrial revolution tomorrow morning. Final thought. When I put this book out, my publisher said, we can't put out a book called The Zero Marginal Cost Society, and nobody's going to read that book. And I said, but you know what? We're going to do it anyway, because I want every teacher in Italy and around the world to introduce their 6-year-old students to zero marginal cost. Why? It's the ultimate metric for reducing our ecological footprint, getting off the old fossil fuel energies, and hopefully in time to address the real issue facing everyone in this room, and that's climate change. Climate change is not an issue. We are now talking about whether this species can survive on this planet. I've been working on this issue since 1973, and I've gotten it wrong all that time. I knew it was coming, but like my colleagues, I couldn't grasp the feedback loops and then how one feedback loop exponentially leads to another feedback loop. We were modeling for years based on linear, not exponential curves. We are now terrified. I don't know what to say to you parents here. We are terrified. And what's never explained about climate change, it's not about, gee, it's snowing today, so I guess the planet's not heating up. I wish Al Gore had explained this, or others. Climate change changes the water cycles of the earth. And now I'll show you why you should be terrified as a parent. We're the watery planet. Our ecosystems have developed over millions of years based on the cloud covers and water regimes of the earth. For every 1 degree that the temperature goes up from the second industrial revolution energies, the atmosphere is sucking up, literally sucking up from the heat, that precipitation. It goes right up there. We're getting more concentrated precipitation across the world in the atmosphere. This is leading to more dramatic water events, more extreme winter snows. You're seeing it this year across America and the world. More dramatic spring flooding. More prolonged summer droughts from California to Pakistan to Sao Paulo. Our ecosystems, with these feedback loops, cannot catch up to the shift in the water cycle. And our scientists in all the studies now, they're chronicling it, say we are now in the 6th extinction event. We've had 5 extinction events in 450 million years, and each time it came quick, the chemistry shifted, and it took 10 million years to get new life back here. Anatomically modern humans, we've been here 175,000 years. We are the youngest species. We're not getting this. As my wife says, we're not grasping this. So our scientists tell us that by the last 2 decades of this century, parents and grandparents, we may lose 70% of the life force on this earth. And 99.5% of all the species that ever existed on this planet have come and gone. 99.5%. And here we are, changing the chemistry of the planet as if this is just one of many interesting issues. What does this have to do with the digitalization of Italy, Europe, and the world? If we can digitalize the entire economy and value chain so that we can have real-time data coming from everywhere, our natural environment, our economic environment, and that data can be fed into our communication, energy, and transport and logistics internet, it means every business, every homeowner, every family, every neighborhood can take their value chain and they can watch the data coming through and they can use the analytics and algorithms to dramatically increase their aggregate efficiencies, their productivity, and reduce their marginal cost. Heading toward near zero marginal cost is the ultimate benchmark for ecological stewardship because it means we're so efficient, we use less resources and we can optimize their use. Less waste, more optimum use. Then if what we do produce in near zero marginal cost in the capitalist market, then we can turn it over to the sharing economy, some of it, and we share our vehicles, share our homes, share our cars, let our children share their toys, which they're doing. More of us using less of the Earth's resources in a circular economy. Nothing goes to the landfill. And if the industries in this room can aggregate the energy internet, we move from fossil fuel and nuclear to clean, green energy in 25 years on an exponential curve. Everyone produces their own as prosumers, consumes it or shares it with others across continental energy internets. And if we can move to the automated transport and logistics internet, we eliminate 80% of the vehicles. That's a lot of material resources. And the rest will be fuel cell electric made out of recycled materials on smart systems where the logistics with analytics allow us to reduce the travel cost with our cargo. The problem with the Paris climate talks in December is every country's going there, hustled in a shrinking second industrial revolution, and they think that the benchmarks are punishments because all their economies are shrinking. What's missing is the industries of the world coming to the table with a new economic narrative for a digitalized Internet of Things platform across the world so that the benchmarks are then goals to success. How do we increase our efficiencies, move to the new energies and the new technologies? So last thought. I spent a lot of time in Italy, some of you know, over 25 years. I've been in every neighborhood, every community. I've spoken to all of your leaders over the years. I'm always frustrated in Italy because I love this country. If I were born again, I'd be Italian. A lot of people think I look Italian. Because I love the creativity. This is an idea factory. If you want to look at a country that's an idea factory, just look at Italy. In the humanities, in the businesses, in the arts, in the natural sciences, this is just a powerhouse of creativity. But now you got to close the deal, scale it up. You got to get rid of that logjam in Rome with your political parties. Because you have an opportunity here. Italy should be side by side with Germany and France, leading us into a digital Europe for the next stage of the European journey. And here's what you'll get if you do. We have a golden goose. We have 500 million consumers in the EU and another 500 million in our partnership regions in the Mediterranean, North Africa. That's 1 billion people. That's the largest potential economic platform in the world. Digital Europe's the next stage of the EU journey. We had the Maastricht for a political treaty, the Euro for a monetary union, the geographic extension with the 28 states. Now it's time for digital Europe. It's time to bring our industries together and tell our younger digital generation, it's your turn. You don't have to stay home and live with mom and dad. You're totally prepared for a digital world. You are the digital generation. And let's harness that creativity in Italy and all the expertise in your world-class industries and show Europe and world this new possibility, this new vision, so we can democratize economic life, hopefully create a more ecological society, hopefully replenish the planet, let life breathe again on this earth. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Now we have some minutes, 5-10 minutes of answer and question before. Prima di tutto però...
I'm going to need a microphone. I'm going to need, somebody just took it.
There's a microphone for the professor.
No, I think she just took it.
Ah, okay. And when can we go over the...
You want me up here?
Yeah.
Go on the stage. All right.
So,
separation anxiety. All right.
The first question, it will be mine. You are a consultant of the European Commission.
Let me stop right there. I am not a consultant.
Ah, okay.
No. This is important. I made a decision when Romano Prodi was at the Commission. He said, why don't you come over here and work with us in Europe? I said, I'll do it, but I don't want any contracts. I'll give my free advice, take it or leave it, because then I'm not beholden.
But the question, it will be the same, because we talk normally about an American dream, but there was also an European dream. How we can renew that dream?
Well, I think what I outlined today is the next stage of that European dream. I grew up on the American dream. It was a very powerful dream, and we had generations of Italians that came to America. That dream really worked. Our dream is more about each person becoming an autonomous agent and being able to become an individual success. And it really worked until the 1980s. We were the most middle-class society. Now, we're 32 among nations in the world in income inequality. We've just lost it. The European dream, if you ask a young European what their dream is, they'll say, not just the individual becoming wealthy, they'll always tell me, my dream, the European dream, is quality of life. Because in Europe, it's more about how the community moves together. The individual is important, but the community is important. I don't have to tell you in Italy where that's really a cardinal rule. We go together. Nobody's left behind. In America, we always talk about growth. In Europe, you talk about sustainable development. The planet counts. In America, we say you have to have a strong geopolitical presence. You have to have a strong military. There are bad guys in the world, which is true. In Europe, you say, yes, but why don't we learn how to find bridges, economic bridges, so we can work together, create a single global community. So there's a lot of differences between the dreams. You know, our dream has had bad times. We've had civil wars, and we've had genocide Indians, and we've had slaves. So we've had the dream, but lots of folks, you know, had to struggle to be part of that dream. Working people, the unions. Your dream is alive. It's in the DNA, cultural DNA of Europe. But the question is, how do you renew it? The digital Europe is the next stage of renewing that dream. Imagine what I said today. Think about your children and grandchildren who are totally digital. They all are digital. They're all doing all this. And you open the door so that it's their turn to create a new economic paradigm. Wow. If we don't do it, you're going to see more and more regression. People are going to get panicked. No future. And they're going to be prey to extreme political extremism on all sides because they won't see a good future. So I think the European dream is strong. I think digital Europe's the next stage. And I think the young generation, give them their own moment and open up the door.
Okay, there's some question from public right there.
I've got to go down here. I'm not coming.
You prefer?
There,
okay,
right?
well, let's go there.
I'm sorry. Makes me, it's strange. Okay.
Hello, Mr. Rifkin. My name is Gianluigi Castelli, and I was former Eni CIO, so I've been working in the energy field for quite a few years. I've been fascinated many years ago when I read your first book on the hydrogen economy, and using hydrogen as an energy vector to allow to exploit a renewable form of energies. And in your analysis, even today, however, I've been a little bit uncomfortable in some steps. Your initial analysis, the initial state analysis is very clear, and the end state analysis is very clear. So steady states stuff is done. The transition. Transition is what worries me a lot. And I haven't seen in what you said any, I would say, clear path to manage this transition, except some steps regarding maybe the use of IT, Internet of Things, and things like that to manage the complexity of the transition state. Because if we look, and this is my last consideration, then I give you the floor, if we look at what's the impact of renewable energies in Europe? Wind, solar, they are discontinuous. And therefore, the only way to make the conventional energy production plants cost effective is to burn low-cost fuel, that today is carbon. The net effect is that whilst we push towards renewable energies to save the world, on the other hand, we pollute more and we produce more CO2. So what are your considerations about the transition between the initial state and the final state when we look such complex, interrelated scenarios? Thanks.
In the Third Industrial Revolution book, I lay out that there are 5 pillars for the energy internet that have to come in and phase at the same time. And that is, number 1, put in feed-in tariffs so that you can incentivize early adoption and so industries can scale. All right? And then you can pass it on to the ratepayers as a short-term hump. Pillar 2, you have to transform all the buildings by retrofitting them, turning them into micro power plants. If you don't retrofit them, don't even start the journey. Pillar 3, you have to put in storage. That's why I wrote the hydrogen economy. Not just hydrogen. We like hydrogen because it's the universal element. It's modular. You can use it in your apartment or in a big utility complex. But we also are agnostic. I like batteries if we can use them, and flywheels, and capacitors, and water pumping in parts of Europe. The storage technologies are already there. They just need to be scaled and incentivized like we did with the renewable energy feed-in tariffs. We just didn't move it quick enough. Then pillar 4, we have to put in the advanced meters and digitalize the energy internet because it's not used to dealing with millions of players. It's a centralized electricity grid that only goes in one direction. It can't handle millions of players in peak and base loads. Then pillar 5, we have to connect it with our vehicles so there's a seamless relationship with the vehicles connected to the grid. So what happened in Germany, for example, is they did well on pillar 1 and pillar 2, but they didn't put in storage on pillar 3, and they didn't put in the advanced meters in pillar 4. To Enel's credit, it did well in Pillar 4 and put in the advanced meters, but it still wants to centralize and have everything go to them, unfortunately. All right? So what I'm saying is that the storage is there. It just has to be scaled. And I'm in direct communication with Sigmar Gabriel in Germany, and they're putting in the storage. They're going to incentivize it. It's just simply scaling it. But if you don't do all those 5 pillars, you can't make the shift. In logistics, in the book, the new book, we have a lot on the logistics and transport. There are 4 pillars you have to do there. None of it's rocket science. None of it's complicated, but it has to be scaled up and incentivized. And it requires collaboration across industries for expertise. In other words, you can't go it alone. The industries that succeed, they'll still be doing one-off products, but they're increasingly going to collaborate in interdisciplinary networks to lay out and manage the infrastructure. That's where we're headed. So I think let's get the storage in. That'll happen in Germany. It's going to happen in the next 6 months. They're moving heavily into storage because you're right. If you don't have the storage, the problem is they can't finance gas-fired power plants and even coal-fired power plants for backup because you have so much solar and wind coming in, you don't use the backup plants except occasionally, so you can't amortize them. So they can't even put in the storage. In Germany, in May of this year, last year, we had one Sunday where 75% of the electricity in Germany, this powerful economy, was solar and wind, and we had negative prices all day because it's free. We got to put in the storage so we can deal with peak and base loads. And all of that has to be digitalized with analytics. Okay, someone else? Negative prices. We never thought we'd see that. They pay us.
Thanks again, Professor. Jonathan Berna, do you think there is space in this revolution, honestly, for small contributors? Or do you think it's a game already settled and that will be played from big player or influencer?
What we are learning with the German experience in Denmark is all the small players came together, private enterprises, SMEs, and electricity cooperatives. They realized they could laterally scale. What I'm saying is the first and second industrial revolution platforms were designed to be centralized because we needed centralized telecommunications, centralized energy, centralized transport and logistics. So we had to create vertically integrated enterprises that could recoup the massive investment they needed. They were the most efficient ways to organize. The reason EMBW and E.ON and these other companies can't do this, they are very good at vertical integration because to get oil or coal or gas from where it's from down in the ground to you and process it and move it, it's extremely complex. You can't do that in every backyard. But the Internet of Things platform is architecturally designed to be distributed, collaborative, open and transparent, and it rewards millions of small players in lateral economies of scale. So the electricity cooperatives have done that. And you're going to see electricity cooperatives all over the world. Millions of small players are only producing a little. When they share across continents, the energy dwarfs little nuclear power plants. It's just because you have millions of small players sharing across continents. So I think you're going to see a renaissance of SMEs because they'll be able to have low entry for the energy internet, near zero marginal cost energy. They'll be able on the transport and logistics internet to have low marginal costs for transporting their cargo. And they can laterally scale those private capitalist enterprises and cooperatives. And guess what? If there's any country that would understand how to do this, it's Italy, where you are the lead in cooperatives. You just have to move the cooperatives into the 21st century. Scale it. The big companies in Italy will not disappear. Some of them will. The ones that flourish will increasingly over a period of time, not tomorrow morning, they'll be less interested in making the products and more interested in aggregating the networks and working with the SMEs with precision 3D printing so that they can aggregate on an even playing field. They won't be the boss, they'll be the partners. So you're going to see, I'm sure, a renaissance of small and medium-sized precision businesses that can enter at low fixed cost and can manage power and move activity at low marginal cost all over the world.
C'è un'ultima domanda per il professor Rifkin. Last question. I have one. Last one.
Nobody from the audience?
Please.
Anybody? Okay. Well, there we go.
What about the public sector, the role of the public sector in the new industrial revolution that you mentioned?
I'm glad you mentioned the public sector, because we're seeing the issues now because, for example, our global group, it's about 100 companies, logistics, ICT, telecom, et cetera. We're seeing the issues here because we have to, each region is local. They have their own needs to customize their own roadmap, but then you have to connect, like Wi-Fi. So the question is, at what level of governance has to be involved in the layout of this infrastructure? Europe has created a new idea. It's the first continental union, and you have something called the subsidiarity principle. No American knows what that is. But when you set it up, the French wanted a centralized federated state, of course. The Brits wanted an open common market, of course, and neither of them got it. What you ended up with here in Europe is what we call a network Europe, where there are levels of governance that's not bottom-up, it's lateral networks. So you have the regions, the localities, the nation states, and the Continental Union, and the subsidiarity principle says you start at the most local unit and then you laterally scale out. It totally fits a third industrial revolution platform where you have to have levels of networks laterally and you collaborate with each other. So in Europe, at Brussels, you're going to have to create the codes, regulations, standards, and interoperability for the digitalization so that all of your companies aren't trying to be the only ones to declare you're going to do it. No one's going to do it alone. Some of you saw the Consumer Electronics Fair this year in Las Vegas, you know, the global fair each year. So it was on the Internet of Things. The head of Samsung led off, asked me to come up with him and lay this out, and we both said, guess what? If any company thinks they're going to create the codes, regulations, and standards for everyone else, it ain't going to happen. So government's going to have to come together and at a continental and global level, create codes, regulations, standards, interoperability. At the national level, you have to create incentives. At the local level, you have to customize the build-out and then connect region to region. So let the subsidiarity principle work for you. You've got an actual political framework to make this work, and you have a platform that's designed to be laterally scaled. Thank you, everybody.
Jeremy Rifkin, thank you so much.